Today on a special crossover, people don't realize this, but the Colorado Rockies made one of the best trades of 2023.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans and Guardians fans, welcome into a special crossover event here on the Locked On Podcast Network between Locked On Rockies and Locked On Guardians. I am one of your hosts today, Paul Holden, your host of Locked On Rockies, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. If your team isn't the Colorado Rockies and it's in fact the Cleveland Guardians, well, you're in the right spot because Justin Lada here is joining us here as we go to I have a lot of ties to Ohio, but most of mine have been closely to Cincinnati. I went to OU, so I've been kind of close to Cincinnati, and I've undervalued Cleveland. I think I got to only go there once, and I'm really excited because this is our first time chatting baseball today. But Justin, for those on the Rockies side that are hearing you for the first time, why don't you give yourself a quick little introduction and all the stuff you do?
Thanks for having me on, Paul. First of all, Cincinnati's not in Ohio; it's Kentucky, and their version of chili is not real. It's disgusting. Let's be upfront about that. There, don't lie to your listeners like that. Well, let's see. Jeff, my co-host, has been doing Locked On Guardians for about over 1,000 episodes now, and I've been with him for we're going on 9 months now. It's been quite a 9-month ride from the playoffs in 2022 to whatever we're calling last year. But yeah, we're over there every day, doing Locked On Guardians, trying to figure out if the Guardians actually are contenders or if we have no idea what they're doing. Truthfully, like sometimes I think I don't know what the Rockies are doing. I also don't know what the Guardians are doing. Like. The Cleveland tries to confuse me as much as the Rockies confuses me, and I don't know if I like that.
No, it's not fun. It's really not. Especially when there's been so many times with Cleveland where they build these great teams and then they're torn down to the studs. And you're like, what the heck's going on? And then the Rockies, it's like, oh, they're finally building something, and then they haven't been able to get anywhere close. So it is kind of frustrating. But one of the things I do want to talk to you about is I think the Guardians get a little benefit from that division of theirs. They're not always dealing with the headaches of playing the Dodgers as much, but with this new scope of baseball, I think it's actually I love the playing every team thing. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think it's just the much better way to experience baseball, and it gives us a chance to see teams like the Guardians, which I think is better for the game as well.
Yeah, I like having other players from out of town come to Cleveland that are interesting. I mean, I think Atlanta came to Cleveland this year, so we got to see Matt Olson and Sean Murphy, two players that Cleveland wanted to trade for, that Cleveland fans wanted them to trade for, and they didn't. So that was fun to get to see that. As I was thinking about this too, I wish we were coming on here to talk about the 2007 World Series. Would have been Cleveland versus Colorado too, and would have been the last time. Cleveland hasn't played Colorado a ton. Obviously they played this year. That's a stadium I'd like to check off my list someday. I love that stadium. Cleveland's got actually some interesting design ideas for they're redesigning their stadium right now, or kind of renovating it, and they've got some very Coors Field like concepts to it that I think are really interesting. Yeah, so more ties than you thought.
Well, and they trade all the time. It's one of the three teams I feel like the Rockies trade with is Cleveland, and that's our big topic of this show. So let's dive into this here. I mean, I don't know. I didn't hear the guy. I didn't know anything about it, and then yet the Rockies make a trade for Nolan Jones, and he ends up being the Rockies' best player in it last year. If you're going by WAR and just other categories, I believe that he deserved to fare much better in the Rookie of the Year race than he did. I think playing for the Rockies and not playing technically a full season for the Rockies since he wasn't up at the start of the season. Just tell me what your thoughts were about the Nolan Jones trade when it happened, because it happened around this time last year. And then bring me to now. Do you see Nolan Jones and you're kind of like, man, if we would have just given that guy more at bats, we would have gotten to see that.
Yeah, I mean, nothing last year Nolan did really surprise me. I mean, there are some red flags out there that I think make it seem like there are some things that he did last year that aren't quite sustainable. But Coors Field's a different environment. So maybe some of those things are more likely to hold closer to what they were this past year than they would be in different environments. But I mean, I've seen Nolan Jones all the way through the minors. I covered him when he was in an A-ball, and he was a third baseman working with John McDonald and Travis Fryman, trying to improve his third base defense. Always a very hard worker, very great kid, good with the fans. I mean, just definitely gets the aspect of being a pro ball player, and fantastic athleticism. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this kid was a hockey player. His family is full of athletes. His sister, I think his brother and his sister, I think, have both played hockey. So, you know, it goes in their family. And the only reason he's playing baseball now, I think, is because of concussions. But sometimes I feel like baseball fans don't appreciate how hard it is to play hockey. Hockey's a really hard sport. Yeah, those are good athletes. They seem like big people that just like to go out there and hit each other, but they're really good athletes. They're all good athletes. But
hey, Larry Walker, man, our Colorado's, our beloved Hall of Famer, Larry Walker. We know all well about the joys of hockey players turned baseball players.
Yeah, so Jones is one of them. I feel like a lot of people didn't give him enough credit for what a good athlete he is. He's got a great arm, so the transition to the outfield obviously makes a ton of sense for him. He played a lot better defensively in the outfield than I thought he was going to, just in terms of that ballpark. You know, that's obviously a hard outfield to cover. It was a new environment for him, and I don't know. I feel like playing in the elevation. Maybe I make this up. Maybe people make this up because I'm not from Colorado, but I feel like playing in the elevation is hard. I always hear about it when like football teams go to Denver to play the Broncos, and it's always a challenge. I have to imagine that's something players have to get used to for any sport outdoors. So he seemed to handle that pretty well. But yeah, I don't want to say this is one Cleveland wishes they got back, because they still have a lot of questions in the outfield. And yeah, they didn't give Nolan Jones a long run. Their issue right now is just they just don't want players that strike out. It seems like there's a lot of teams headed this way. They don't want players to strike out, but Nolan Jones does a lot of things this team really needed last year. That he walks and he hits for home, he hits for power. They didn't have any of that last season. So that's a profile they could have afforded to fit into their lineup. But you know, they're betting on other guys who strike out less and maybe are better defenders than him. Like, I wouldn't put Nolan Jones in center, and they decided to hang on to Will Brennan and give him a lot of playing time. And there's a lot of fans right now that are mad that they cut Oscar Gonzalez the other day, and they think it's related to Nolan Jones. I think it's more related to Will Brennan. But yeah, like I said, he was 2020 player last year. Not surprised by that at all. Like I said, there's some things I feel like that may not hold up long term, but because of the environment, maybe some things will hold closer to that line than I think.
What are the things you're concerned about not long term? I mean, my biggest concern with the Rockies next year, they have a lot of they do have a good core of exciting young guys, but it's a lot of guys that do need to take another step and prove that consistency. It's one thing to do it once at the major league level, but if you're going to be a big leaguer, you got to do it every day. And while Nolan Jones did it, and I'm not going to sit here and think that he can't do it again, you know, these are things you have to keep in mind. What are some of the things that you're worried about? Strikeouts, of course, are a red flag for any Rockies hitter, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of swing and miss in his game. One of the things that we saw coming up with him was at times he could be passive in his approach. So you get the high walk total, which is good, right? That buoys a lot of things where if you're not hitting well, you have the walks to hold back on. But he would be passive. You'd see a lot of times where he'd be like up 3-0 in a count or 2-0 in a count. He might strike out looking, or he might be up, you know, at the same time, he might be down 0-2 in a count. He might come back to walk. So you get a lot with him. Maybe being too selective. So the strikeout rate to me isn't really a big concern, because I think he makes enough contact. I think for him, it's more of just a passive approach. But, you know, you're going to look at the average on balls in play, 401, right? Nobody sustains that. Like even Luis Ariz last year was a batting champ. His was 364, and that's unusually high. And yeah, there are ways that guys can obviously keep their average on balls in play highly afloat with hard contact and speed. And Jones does some of that to an extent. He hits the ball hard, but not to a 401 degree. And he has a higher ground. He last year had a higher ground ball rate than he did fly ball rate, which is not good for a player with his skill set. Very hard to replicate that 2 years in a row. I mean, again, ask any Cleveland fan about Oscar Gonzalez if they are not throwing things at you right now. There's a lot of mad people out there about this. So I don't know if he's going to replicate that 297 average from the strikeouts, the passivity, and the average on balls in play. But I mean, I think he could be a 2020 player again. I think he's that good. It's just, you know, are you going to be able to settle for a 240, 250 average, and what that's going to drop his OBP to, and that's going to drop his slugging percentage to? Could still be a good player, but I would be cautious of that batting line overall coming down significantly.
Yeah, that would be an area and a big area of concern for the Rockies. And if they see that a downturn, it's going to really factor into how they what they're going to do, because the Rockies got a lot of issue with what they're going to do with right field and first base. Chris Bryant's moving over there to first base, and they bring Charlie Blackmon back in. They have a couple of other young guys. How much do you want to put? I mean, Nolan Jones with that arm in right field would be great, because you're really going to be able to rock it and use it the most. How much is the fatigue of playing left field at Coors Field going to add into the potential issues of that? But like you said, the athleticism was great. And the other thing that was really encouraging about Nolan Jones, great road numbers for him this year too. He was able to go out on the road, basically do it the same, basically produce the same level, which was awesome. But like you said, I think as excited as I am by Nolan Jones, and I do think that he is a great player, there is just the back of my mind of just sophomore slumps and just adjustments, because pros are now seeing these guys and are going to have a better understanding of them. We're going to talk a little bit more about Nolan Jones, and I'm curious if the Guardians might be interested in some of the other veterans that the Rockies might have. We're going to do that, talk about potential trades and such coming up here in segment number 2 of today's crossover episode. But before we do that, got to tell you about some of the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Jase Medical. We use sports as an escape from the crazy realities of real life, but sometimes you need to be prepared for tough situations, and it's always good to plan ahead of time. Whether you're on extended travel, bracing for a major weather event, or limited by another supply chain shortage, you are covered by our friends at Jase Medicals. Our partner at Jase Medical has antibiotics and a long list of daily medications that can be ordered in a 1-year supply. Yep, that's right, a 1-year supply, so you can really plan ahead and make sure that you have the stock that you need. Even ED generics for Cialis or Viagra, Jase Medical has the Jase case. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, tinnitus, skin infections, among others. This stuff couldn't really happen to any of us. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON. That's offer code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com for $20 off your order. Get $20 off your order at Jase Medical code when you use the code LOCKEDON. Special crossover here between Locked On Rockies and Locked On Guardians. Paul Holden and Justin Lada here talking Nolan Jones. And I'm glad we're talking Justin, because it's important to have these conversations and really dive into just how tough it is to replicate that success at the major league level, which I think it proves that baseball is one of the hardest things out there. And so I think I'm going to hold on. If he goes 2020, I'm even going to maybe even push for hopefully maybe a 25-20, which would be great if the Rockies could get a little bit more home run production out of him. But I'm curious, though. We talked a lot about Nolan Jones, but let's talk about Juan Brito there and him going over there. How are you feeling about him going through the system? What was his time like? I believe only in the minors last year, didn't make it up to the majors, I believe, last year, if I'm correct.
Yeah, he spent the final week of the season in AAA. He was in AA. I'm sorry, he started the year in High A and he got to AA last year, so he jumped 2 levels. So impressive year. Only 21, switch hitter. I think the issue with him is I don't know where his defensive home is. And Cleveland's 40-man roster is littered with middle infield guys who are switch hitters who will have a lot of the same traits. Brito doesn't run as well as some of the other ones. He doesn't have a high-end glove like the other guys in the 40-man roster. But, he doesn't strike out. He makes a lot of contact. He does some other things well offensively. It's just a profile they've loaded up on so much the last several years. So that made the trade so strange. Like, they've got Brian Rocchio and Angel Martinez and Jose Tena and Gabriel Arias and Tyler Freeman. All these guys, to an extent, do some of the same things. There's a lot of crossover in their skill sets. So very bizarre trade. But that being said, I think Juan Brito was arguably their best minor league player last year. Chase DeLauder had a great year for them in the minors, but he missed the first half of the year with a foot injury. He does play outfield, so, everybody's hoping for the best for him, considering Cleveland's outfield deficiency. I kind of wonder if Juan Brito's future home is left field. Like I saw him in Lake County in high A last year, and I thought, if it's not second base, it's probably left field. I don't think he's a third baseman. He's definitely not a shortstop. Like I said, he's not that great of a runner. So there's a lot of pressure on that bat to perform. And he does some things well. Like I don't want to compare him to Jose Ramirez because nobody is Jose Ramirez. Let's be clear about that. But some of the things that make Jose Ramirez very well, despite the fact that he doesn't hit the ball hard like a lot of power hitters do, is he is very good at pulling the ball in the air, which is a good way to maximize what kind of talent you have if you're not going to be an Aaron Judge type hitter exit velocity wise, right? So if you get the ball in the air enough and you get to the ball, you make enough contact and you pull it, the ball is going to go over the fence 20, 25 times a year if you do it that way. That's what made Jose Ramirez good. And Juan Brito does do that to some extent. He hits a lot of fly balls. He's very good at pulling fastballs in the inner half of the plate to the right side. Those are things that made Jose Ramirez break out. So those are things you look at and you think, okay, is this a 20 home run guy who plays second? And Cleveland's already got a platinum glove player at second base. So Juan Brito, either they move Jimenez over to shortstop or they put Brito in left field. I don't know. Just a very strange trade to make it. But like I said, I think this is them. It was them putting a lot of eggs in the basket of Will Brennan. They really like Will Brennan. I've heard things that they've said there's people in the organization who like Will Brennan better than George Valera, who was one of their top outfield prospects the last several years. So this trade was really, they liked Brito, but they were also banking on Will Brennan. So hopefully their future outfield consists of, I don't know, Juan Brito and whoever the heck can play center field, Stephen Kwan and Will Brennan or Chase DeLauder, or maybe they think that they're comfortable moving Andres Jimenez over to shortstop. But I'm pretty sure they wouldn't take the trade back. Like there's trades they regret. The trading Junior Caminero to Tampa Bay, the team would love to have back. I don't know if they take this one back as much as I think that Nolan Jones provides a profile this team really could use in their lineup.
Yeah, and got to prove it a little bit more until you really can make that call, But I like this level of move between these type of teams where it wasn't flashy at the time. It was kind of just, hey, we'll see what happens and question marks and for the Rockies, it was like, wow, great, this is really panning out. But really at the time, it was like, let's see maybe a change in scenery and just see what happens for both these guys. But both highly regarded guys, though. I mean, these weren't, no-name prospects in the system. These were two prospects that were certainly talked about in their respected teams and markets. So moving from that trade to potential trades now, I hear the Guardians might be shopping a pitcher. The Rockies need pitchers. Not sure if they have enough to be able to get a deal done for someone in the likes of Bieber, but I'm curious, and you kind of hinted at that. Rockies and Guardians don't make much sense as trade partners for some of their vets. I can't see them wanting to take on a Brendan Rodgers or a Ryan McMahon, but could they be interested in potentially an Elias Diaz?
No, now that Bo Naylor is firmly entrenched as the starter next year, and they claimed Christian Bethancourt off waivers from Tampa Bay, and they tendered him a contract for arbitration. So they're pretty set at catcher, and they even have David Fry as the third string catcher who can play multiple positions. I mean, they definitely do need catching depth, but they're pretty set at the major league level as far as catchers go right now. So I think that's probably not on their offseason to-do list. If they didn't have Christian Bethancourt, I would say yes. But I would also imagine Diaz, if they were to trade Diaz, I would think that they want to trade him as a starter, and coming to Cleveland, he would not be a starter because otherwise Cleveland wouldn't be paying starter value in a trade.
Yeah, and if it's all locked there, and I don't know if you when you mention it, I can't imagine. You said you got a platinum glove on second base, so that doesn't takes Brendan Rodgers out of the equation there, especially when you're looking at a bounce back year. But I'm curious if someone like a Ryan McMahon might ever be interesting for the Guardians, someone that you kind of know what you're getting, has elite level defense, but maybe needs a new team to help unlock that swing and unlock that offensive potential.
Well, Cleveland is not the team to be picking on other hitters that have not developed the way they should have elsewhere and take them in and make them better. Pitching, yes, they can, squeeze the juice out of anything in a pitcher that hasn't been developed, but hitting, not so much. No, they're set at infield. I mean, obviously they have Jose Ramirez at third base for however long he can play third base. He is getting, a little up there in years in terms of baseball. But no, they're set in the infield. They got Kyle Manzardo coming up at first base. They have Josh Naylor at first base for the next couple of years. And yeah, this infield, they cannot afford to add more infielders to that 40-man roster. If they do, I'll be more. I'm already confused in a lot of ways, but that would just confuse me even more. So maybe they would do it. I don't know.
It would fit the theme. It would fit. It would fit with everything that we've talked about, and kind of going with it as a team that's a head scratcher. What would make you feel confident about this team that the Guardians would do this offseason? Obviously, Rockies Guardians not looking like they were actually trade partners. Let's visit that real quick. Cal Quantrill. I mean, I don't necessarily really, again, it's a catching prospect that the Rockies aren't going to probably see anytime soon. I kind of like this trade, even with the red flags that come with Cal. What can you tell me about Cal and what you know about him and his work?
I really like Cal, the person. He was fantastic in the Cleveland community, and I don't know what you're into musically or what your listeners are into musically, but he used My Chemical Romance as a warm-up song.
Excellent.
I was always a big fan of that. Yeah, you don't get enough of that in baseball. It's a lot of country, so love that. Now, Cal's a great dude, great competitor. When he's pitching well, he's fun to watch because obviously he pitches to contact. He doesn't strike a lot of dudes out. So there's a lot of variables in play there with performance, but he keeps the infielders up and going, and he gets fired up. He is a competitor on the mound. He's fun to watch, and consummate pro, goes about his work. He pitched through some injuries last year because obviously Bieber and McKenzie were hurt for Cleveland last year, and they needed a lot of stability in the rotation. He pitched through injuries he probably shouldn't have, which contributed to his poor year. So you can, maybe look past some of those things because he was pitching through shoulder pain quite a bit and altering his mechanics. But yeah, there are red flags. Again, he doesn't miss bats. For a guy who is a pitch to contact guy, not a lot of ground balls. That's a little scary. Fly balls in Coors Field, I don't think are great, right? That's a pretty well-known fact. We don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not unless they're going over the fence for the home team.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest concerns and issues with the Rockies pitching staff last year. Home runs allowed. I mean, there's stuff to like, and the Rockies do believe heavily in generating weak contact and letting the defense work because the Rockies do have some good defenders out there. But I can't sit there and say that it doesn't worry you to just go and say, hey, it's another guy that we got to hope that he's not, because it just seems like another thing. It's like Kyle Freeland or Austin Gomber cruising. Third time through the lineup, they have a read, and there's a walk that just turned into a 2-run home run, or a walk, a bloop single, 3-run shot. The Rockies have to avoid that. But in 2024, I think the Rockies desperately need starting pitching and they don't need to go overboard on how they acquire it. And I think this was a right level of move, and seems like a guy that can eat, hopefully if healthy, can eat some innings for the Rockies, which honestly is what they need. Because if he can go 6 and the game is he lets up 3 runs or something like that, you're all right with that start. You're pretty fine with that start, and you hope your offense can do this. It can back you up. We're going to close things out with a conversation that I think is interesting. Compare the divisions, and I want to see if Justin thinks that the Guardians are contenders or not. We got to do some classic off-season sports radio talk. And curious if there's any questions Justin might have about the Rockies here going forward. But we're going to do all that coming up in segment number 3. Welcome back into special crossover episode of Locked On Rockies and Locked On Guardians. Paul Holden here with Justin Lada here. Our first ever crossover together. We're having a great time, getting a lot of great insight into the Rocky, one of the Rockies' favorite trade partners, the Cleveland Guardians. I think they only trade with Cleveland. I think they trade with St. Louis, and that's really, it seems like, it feels like about it that the Rockies for who they make their trades with. But Justin, the thing that's I think really different about these two teams, as much as they have some similarities in their frustrations, is the Guardians don't have the same level of issues with dealing with the Dodgers and a Padres team that spends a bunch of money and the Giants team that never goes away. Their divisions aren't on the same kind of level. Is this a benefit for the Guardians to play in a division that isn't so top heavy? Sometimes I feel like the Diamondbacks benefited last year because they have to play LA so much. And I don't know if that ever actually translates as well as maybe my brain makes it think. What's your thought of the state of the division and the Guardians' chances of taking the division crown?
Well, I thought they were going to repeat in 2023. They did in 2022. But we found out the hard way. That's very hard when you're relying on a bunch of guys who put the ball in play and you're hoping for good average on balls in play, like we started this conversation out about. Yeah, you would think that playing in a division that really never has a favorite every year would be beneficial. You think, I mean, and to be fair, Cleveland has the most AL Central Division titles since the division was created after expansion. But yeah, it's nobody spends a lot of money in this division, outside of Mike Ilitch when he was at the end of his life and wanted a championship from the Tigers, and he was adding, David Price and Prince Fielder and all those guys. Nobody in this division spends money. Maybe it's the Midwest thing in them, and nobody wants to outbid anybody. They're just trying to be nice to each other. But yeah, they're so nice that nobody wants to even win more than 84 games a year to win this division. That's how nice we are over here in the Midwest. You would think it would be a benefit, but it's honestly every year it's just sad. Like nobody respects the AL Central because you've got owners who, continue to play payroll games and whatever the revenue is, just, you turn a lot of fans off that way by every time a good player comes in. I mean, they're lucky that Jose Ramirez was desperate to stay in Cleveland. I'm not sure, give him that. I have no idea what they did to make it feel like Jose Ramirez wanted to spend the rest of his life in Cleveland, but they did that, which is great. That's not something they've done very well historically. So that's the one thing we can point to. And, it'd be great if you could build around that player. How many teams would love to have a player like that to build around? And instead it's kind of like, okay, what else do we do? Is that good enough? Is that good enough for you? No, it's not. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's like pulling teeth because they did one nice thing. It's like, no, you just because you got the really great player, you got to build up and around that player. It's like a certain third baseman that a team in Colorado had before they spoiled that relationship. And even though they said that, and it's that it gets a little frustrating because that's the thing. It's like, I know the markets, I know that there's these things, but these are teams that have very passionate and dedicated fans and are really good for the game when they play good baseball. And this is a prime opportunity for the Guardians. It seems like the Twins are going to be, dealing with some regression, I think, this year with all of the losses to that pitching rotation. The Tigers, will they, won't they? The Royals are on technically by people's preseason metrics on the same level as the Rockies. I guess by some people, they consider the Rockies to be a worse team than the Royals, which I don't think so. The Rockies are bad, but I'd like to at least they're bottom 5 bad, not bottom 3 bad, if you ask me. And then of course the White Sox dealing with that, and it's just so frustrating when ownership just, the Rockies are in a position where they'll spend money, but then it's like wacky spending and weird, and they don't deal with these other issues. It's something I talk about a lot on my show. It's like Coors Field, people go, they have the deals. Colorado, I don't think Denver's a small market. I don't think you can sit here and call Denver a small market anymore with the growth that it's seen and the success of every other major sports men's sports team of the big four in the area. So I can really relate to just being really frustrated by ownership. And unfortunately, there's too many times where when you're trying to give your analysis and hopes for the team, but you have to just shrug and say, we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's 75 years and counting in Cleveland. I know Rockies haven't won a World Series either, but only been around since 1993. We've been waiting since 1948, man.
Well, what happened in 2007 if Cleveland didn't blow it to the Red Sox? I think that, it would have been, man, talk about if there's a portal I could look into, just give me a portal to 2007 where I can see what happens if Cleveland plays Colorado in 2007. But yeah, at least, I think hopefully we'll see if Cleveland's just fun. I like I said, I got strong Ohio ties, and I think that Cleveland's a place that gets a little bit of a bad rap in everything. And I think that it means something that a player like Jose Ramirez wants to stay in Cleveland. And that should be something that should encourage you as an owner to build around, because there's a lot of other really cool and exciting stuff going on with that team. It's just, you do got to spend some money. Like, I know it's not that philosophy, but hey, Texas just won a World Series, and you can't deny what they did. And they were in a similar situation to the Rockies not that long ago. But Justin, we're going to wrap things up here. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great chatting with you and finally being able to get some more insight into, I think, one of the sneakiest trades of last year, is something that Rockies fans are really excited to see. And I'm hoping it obviously works out for the Guardians too. One of those great, one works for both teams type of situations. But where can they go to stay up to date with all things you and all things Guardians ball?
Yeah, we're over at Locked On Guardians on YouTube. We are super close to 2,000 subscriptions. So if anybody out there just wants to throw a subscription on our way, would be thrilled. We're trying to push there to the end of the year. And I think we're Locked Guardians on X or Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days.
Go subscribe there. Cleveland rocks, just like they do every All-Star game. We'll do the same thing. We'll partner up, and we'll try to get them to that 2,000 subscribers. If you're curious, I'm Paul Holden. You can find us over at Locked On Rockies on YouTube. Those subscriptions, folks, if you subscribe to our YouTube channels, it's really one of the best ways to help our shows. Really, really do appreciate when you do that. For your second listen, go check out Locked On MLB. Sully's got you covered with all things Major League Baseball. And until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Podcast Network.